I like it. A nice good morning, and then everybody calms down, gets ready, attentive. I love it. So once again, I will say good morning, everyone, so I can hear you back. Excellent. All right, my name is Ruth Ann Page, and as a member of the Central Jersey Club of the National Association of Negro Business and Professional Women's Clubs Incorporated, it is my pleasure to serve as your Mistress of Ceremonies today. And I'd also like to welcome you on behalf of the Central Jersey Club to our Leadership Summit, and in alignment with the National Women's History Alliance, we will focus on the theme of women who advocate for equity, diversity, and inclusion. So speaking of inclusion, hopefully each of you had a wonderful International Women's Day yesterday. Did everybody celebrate yesterday? And International Women's Day is actually celebrated on March 8th every year, and that is to commemorate the movement for women's rights. And the focus this year was on #InspireInclusion. So that inspires each of us to have a world where difference is valued and celebrated. And that is not just a fad, that means it's a call to action for each of you to ensure that you are including others. So you will hear a lot more about equity, diversity, and inclusion. As we're confident, we've lined up a fantastic summit for you today. And for those who were able to attend last night's mixer, hopefully you enjoyed the networking and experience and are looking forward to more today. So before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge our Central Jersey Club president, Mrs. Kenesha Jones. And we bring special greetings to our National Association president, Dr. Terry O'Neill Ford. And our national second vice president, Brittany Montgomery. And of course, I'd be remiss if I did not welcome and thank our sponsor, Frank Luna from First Energy Foundation. So now, while we have a lot of valuable information to share with you today, we're first going to kick off with something very important, and that would be fuel for the body. So we're going to kick off with lunch. So hopefully you will enjoy. What I'd like to do is invite you to lunch first, beginning with our front tables here. If you can, you're going to exit out these doors and begin lunch, and then we'll go to our middle tables, followed by the rear. So thank you, and after lunch, I will return and we'll kick off our additional agenda items. So hopefully you've enjoyed your lunch. For those of you who are not finished, you can continue to enjoying as you see fit. The food will still be out in the foyer for those of you who would like to continue to indulge. Otherwise, we're going to kick off with the rest of our program. So now I would like to present to you our Central Jersey Club member and Chief Executive Officer of Malia Bloom, Pamela Major, who will serve as our panel moderator today. Pamela?
Thank you so much. I, again, extend greetings to our illustrious members from national, as well as my president, Kenesha Jones, and to all my CJC sisters, to my friends who have come from Impact 100, Society for Prevention of Teen Suicide, PWN, and just everybody who just loves us and loves this topic. We thank you for being here. Now, I tend to be the person that says hard things out loud. Maybe that's why they asked me to be the moderator of this particular panel, because I don't have a problem saying hard things out loud. And DEI has become a topic, and we keep adding letters, right? Because it was DEI, and then DEIB, DEIJ. And why? Because there's not enough real conversation. Not enough real conversation. But I am convinced when I see this sea of beautiful women that we're going to have a real conversation. And not only are we going to have a real conversation, but we're going to leave with something to do. That this is going to be a mission-oriented. You know how we love and hate the term a working lunch, right? This is going to be a mission-oriented event. And so as I invite the wonderful panel to the table, I want to take a few minutes to share with you some thoughts that I've had. You all can come to the table. I want to take a moment to just share some of the things that I've been thinking about over the last week as we've come to this point. We are dealing with states that are not teaching about history in a way that is historically accurate. We are dealing with women of color who, as in an article that I just read, call themselves the one and onlys. And as a woman of color who has been in more meetings than I want to even admit, and I was the only woman of color in those meetings. And comfortable because I really like me, but uncomfortable because I'm not the only one. And as we begin to discuss this topic, as we begin to deal with it, I want to ask you one question in advance. And when we finish the panel, there's going to be a break, and perhaps you can share with one another your responses to this question. And that is this: what are you going to commit to do differently when you leave this space? Who are you going to speak to? I'm going to push it a little bit and say, I want you, particularly women that are not women of color, to look around your meeting spaces and see, does this look like a rainbow, or does this look like one flavor ice cream? What are we dealing with? And so with my wonderful panel, who I'm going to, when I walk over to them, they're going to introduce themselves. And you may have seen Sylvia Jacobs was not able to join us today. She had an emergency, but we have a wonderful backup, which is, to brag on CJC. We have a wonderful backup in one of our own Central Jersey Club sisters. And we're going to ask some questions, and we're going to deal with some things. And I want you to truly think about, what can I do? What can I do? There was a movie many years ago, The Year of Living Dangerously, with Mel Gibson and Sigourney Weaver. And, I can't think of the lady. She's on NCIS, Linda Hunt. And her character said in the movie to Mel Gibson, when dealing and confronting issues of terrible behavior towards people, he asked Mel Gibson's character this question: what then must we do? And so as we come to the table today, and you look beautiful, I must say, you're just very well dressed, very well spoken, you smell good, all of the things. What then must we do? And so let's go ask some questions, and as we take our break before we announce our keynote speaker, I want you to think about what you're going to do. So glad I didn't trip. So I'm going to allow our speakers, our panelists, to introduce themselves, and I will start to my immediate left. Maria, would you please introduce yourselves to our company?
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. I think it's afternoon now, sorry. Maria Diaz. I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging for New Jersey Natural Gas, New Jersey Resources.
And to my next immediate left, Heather.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Heather Barberi. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the executive director for the Grennan Foundation. We are a place-based family foundation that works here at the Central Jersey Shore.
And our wonderful, wonderful stand-in, but now she's just her, Tasha.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tasha Youngblood Brown. I'm a managing director with Ernst & Young, where I lead our higher education practice and our national consulting group. But I also, another hat I wear is to advocate for supplier diversity in the corporate and nonprofit space.
Thank you. Well, we are going to jump into it. And the first question that we have is for everybody. And that question is, what is DEI? And make sure my eyes work. What is your definition of DEI, and how should it work?
Would you like me to start? Okay, so for me, and it's probably present thinking as well. So I add A to DE&I, so diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, because often people with developmental disabilities, right, mental or physical, are overlooked. So in my space, especially in education, we include the A at the end. And I would say, for me, it's coming from a space of equity. I think it drives equity, it drives access. It should not be the thing that we do. It should be a present way of working and thinking. It underpins everything. I'm always an advocate for, I'll say the underdog, but the one that might be sitting in the corner, that's not being included, that's not being engaged. Those are the people that I look after and try to put my arms around. But if you think about that physically, but also think about that in our practices. So how can we work? How can we gather? How can we organize? How can we be advocates in the community by finding ways to include everyone's voice?
Thank you.
Following that, and we use EDIB, and we add the A, we add the J for justice. I think they're all so interconnected. I think they're all individual pieces, but they work together. In thinking of equity, same foundational, right? It's ensuring opportunities and resources are distributed fairly. And that doesn't mean equally, right? Because we know not everyone's starting from the same place, and we know there's systemic barriers, and we know there's historical inequity. So how do we look at it from that frame? When I think about diversity, I think about just beautiful tapestry, right? Everybody bringing something different, and that can be based on race, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, all the things. And inclusion is really, how do we create cultures and environments where people can show up as their authentic selves, where they can feel safe, where they can feel like their voice is heard, that it's respected. And I think sometimes we, especially I can speak from the nonprofit place, because I sit around board tables, and sometimes we try to focus on one of the pieces without the others, and it can lead to challenges. So we might hear, we need to add more diversity to the board, right? Which we need to do, and that's a wonderful thing. But if we're not looking at the equity piece, and we're not thinking about barriers, we're not thinking about the organization and what's happening around the board table, if we're not thinking about inclusion and creating a space where people can come into that board meeting and feel like they're welcomed and included and they can use their voice, are we actually tokenizing people, right? And are we actually doing more harm? So I think they're so interconnected, and it's important for us to think about all those pieces together.
Wow. So let me just start with wow. So for me, diversity, equity, inclusion, they're all interconnect with each other. They all bring us to that one foundational piece that I believe we all have to embrace, the belonging piece. Being able to level the playing field, provide everyone with the same opportunities, giving people access. But we can't give people that, or our people that, right, if we don't create that accessibility piece, and if we don't help them understand that their diverse perspectives is what makes us all whole.
Needed a break after that, right? So, well, now let's get a little bit further into it. This question is for Heather and for Maria. What are the biggest misunderstandings about DEI?
Heather's like, go. My mic is on red, so
Okay.
let's. So, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, accessibility. I think the biggest misconception is that you have to do it, right? I think the biggest misconception is thinking that you don't play a role in ensuring that everyone has a levelized playing field. Being able to provide everyone with the same opportunities is really what DEIB is, right? But when you try to hold individuals accountable for not providing equal access and opportunities, then you become what? A villain, right? Seriously. I took on this role because I want to be that driver of change. I took on this role because I've seen firsthand what happens when opportunities are not presented to you. I took on this role because I want to ensure that every single person has the same accessibility, is afforded the same opportunities. I will tap you on your shoulder and you don't even know why I'm tapping you on your shoulder. I see something in you and I will help you every step of the way. But you can't use that as an excuse to say, well, they didn't raise their hand. They really didn't want this opportunity. No, you made it so that they wouldn't feel comfortable raising their hand. Thank you.
I think there's so many misconceptions in the work, and I'm gonna talk about it from a place as being a white woman in this work, and I think this shows up often. And I know not a monolith, and this is not accusatory, but I'm gonna only speak from a place that I know. I think sometimes we look at, we're gonna read the book, we're gonna do the workshop, and we're gonna check the box, and I am a accomplice, I am a co-conspirator, I am an ally, I am all the things. And checking the box does not make you're not on the journey, right? It's how do you change behavior? How do you change your actions? How do you actually excavate the things inside of you and really grapple and wrestle with it constantly? That's lifelong. That's not one book. And those are important, right? Like the books, the workshops, all those things I think are pieces on the journey. But I think it's showing up, and it's showing up consistently. It's moving to action. Pam and I were talking earlier. I saw something on Instagram earlier this week, and I wish I had the author, but they said the listening and learning in DEIB has become like the thoughts and prayers, right? So we think about whether it's a school shooting, we hear thoughts and prayers. Has there been movement in legislation? Whatever one thinks of it. But from a DEI place, listening, learning, that's wonderful. That's part of the journey. But if we're not actually moving to action and doing something, are we really actually moving the needle? So I think it's this feeling of, yes, read the books, do the workshops, but how are we actually changing behavior? So I think that's really important.
Thank you for that. And to your point, one of the things that I share with people often is that you have to learn to inspect with respect, right? Inspect with respect. What does that mean? That means that, you don't just come up to a person, and I have had this happen, so I say it like this. How did you learn to speak so well?
Can I
right?
touch your hair?
Dude,
No.
exactly. I don't, right? What some people don't understand is that, you know, as a black woman, I could be pet like an animal. And so, no, you may not touch my hair. You have to be related to me, like mom, dad, married to me, my hairdresser, myself. We all get to a doctor, medical professional that needs to touch my head. Outside of that, it's disrespectful. So it's have you ever said to someone, I clearly see that I overstepped by asking that question. Could we talk about that some more? Inspect with respect. I was asked at one point, what religion are black people? Like all of us are the same faith. These are questions. These are questions that, you know, and if you respond with any level of anger, you're the angry black woman. Right? I'm not an angry black woman, I'm a disappointed one. Because I think after 400 years plus, we should be doing better. But with that, I'm going to move to our speed round. I'm going to, okay.
Let's come back to that one. No, we'll come back to it.
Okay, all right. So speed round. I shared with them I'm going to do a speed round. I didn't tell them what words I was going to give them. I'm going to give them a word, and they can give a one-word to one-sentence response to the word that I'm about to give them. Are we ready to watch this? This is going to be good. Get your cameras out. Get your cameras out. Okay. Okay. So, word one. Allyship.
You going to? That's yours.
No, this all everybody. This is everybody.
We all have the same. Okay.
Solidarity. One more.
Okay.
A given.
Awe.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Microaggression.
Oh, darn. I really hope there's no camera now. Excuse.
Subtle, not subtle discrimination.
Annoying.
Isn't this good? Aren't you all enjoying this? Okay.
Sweating. I know. So am I. I'm a preparer.
Okay. And the last word. You all are like, I'm so glad this is the last word. So we'll know what's coming next. Future.
Be a superhero.
Move to action.
Mine, yours, ours.
Can we give them a round of applause for that?
Can I get one? I mean.
Okay. Okay, so this one is just for Tasha. What questions surprise you about this topic?
There's several that come to mind. I'll say the first question or thoughts that I often get is that it's a thing that we must do. It's non-negotiable, right? We said it was foundational. So those, you know, when I'm approached, whether it's the corporate space or in the community, you know, how do we do diversity? How do we do, you know, D&I, A, B, as if it's hard, right? But I believe that, you know, everything that we do, if we do it with the other person in mind, if we lead with kindness, it should be a given. So that's one. So those questions still surprise me. And then on the other side of it, which is why I said let's double click on it, you talked about being the angry black woman. And I remember mentoring a young woman who came to me and said, I really want to fit in. I thought of imposter syndrome, not a bad word or term, by the way. But she said, I don't want to come off as the angry black woman. And I said, well, do you get angry sometimes? And she said, yes. I said, okay, so you should have permission to feel the way you feel, right? We can't show up in spaces where we are muting who we are, what we say, how we move, how we act. We have to honor who we are as individuals, because then we start to morph into something that God didn't intend for us, right? And so I believe that, these questions that we ask ourselves in trying to be a part, when I believe every woman in this room and those outside, when we step into the room, it's ours. And we need to move that way. And so on both sides, right? The fact that we have to do it, it's a thing. And then on the other side, that we still question ourselves and how we need to show up, right? That's self-talk, and I practice it every day. I'm an overthinker. I was talking to somebody about this recently. I'm an overthinker. I challenge myself. I'm an analytic, so I'm always like, I got 4 different options of everything. But ultimately, you just show up. And you try to find those spaces where you're comfortable, but we have to stop questioning ourselves, because therein lies, I think, the step between, our greatness, right? When we start to question ourselves.
And it seems like, a current term, gaslight. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, I should be angry at that question you just asked me. I should be. Right. That's a normal response. Right. And if the situation was reversed, you'd be angry too. So with our next question, and get your questions in mind, because we have 2 questions left, and after my questions, you all get to, the floor will be open for you for a little bit. So this is to Maria and Tasha. What is the greatest breakthrough or disappointment you have experienced in this work?
The greatest disappointment? Individuals that attend unconscious bias, microaggressions, psychological safety training, and think they're cured of ignorance.
Yes.
Greatest breakthrough is having platforms that we've never had before to be able to make a difference and keep being drivers of change.
So I'll take her second one, because I like that one. And I was going to say that too. As far as a breakthrough, right, is, it's not enough to have the seat at the table, but what are you going to do with it, right? We often say, I want a seat at the table, seat at the table. What you going to do with it? Because if you're occupying space, then it's a waste. And sometimes you're asked to be at the table because you are perhaps fulfilling a goal, right, a quota, or whatever. I mean, I'm very much in the corporate space. I've been almost for 30 years. And so sometimes that happens. But I tell you what, you have me here, so you're going to get what you came for. You may not assumed that, but you're going to get, you're going to get what I'm going to give you in terms of that. And so I think, that could be a breakthrough or a disappointment, but certainly when we have this access, using it to really bring others after. Right, and support that. Because sometimes, and I'll say it, I hate to be like a bunch of cliches, but this crabs in a barrel thing that we have sometimes, especially amongst women or women of color, needs to stop. And we need to support each other in big ways. I don't have to say that to any of my club sisters, but it happens outside, y'all. It happens out there. Not in here, but out there. And so we need to be able to support ourselves in that way. And a disappointment, I would say, I've experienced times where I've had DE&I leaders, try to coach me or counsel me to be someone I'm not, or to be like someone else that might be performing. It's really hard for me to be anything other than me. I haven't even tried. I mean, I'm just not even going to do it, right? But certainly someone having a vision or a model or a mode of what they're comfortable and what they're used to, and then when you step up, right, if you don't fit that mold or that model, then something must be wrong with you. It takes a really strong person, I think mentally. It takes prayer to know that you are who you are. You should be where you need to be, and you're going to do what God has intended you to do, despite what someone might be trying to shape you into. So that's a disappointment, because they might think that that's the, that's the firm mantra, that's the model, that's the, that's what the other black woman did, so that's what you should do. No, right? So that individuality, I think, and that diversity in who you are as a person has to always show up, and you can't be afraid to move that way.
Perfect. So for our last question, this is to everybody. If your dreams about DEI were to come true, what would that dream look like?
You go ahead.
I'm only taking this out. So I feel like in my work world and just in life, I'm surrounded by just amazing people who challenge me and push me and make me think. And my president, where I work, we were in a cohort, and we had these two amazing leaders, Charles McDonald and John Scott, who run this organization, CEP, and they had us do an exercise around what would the world look like if it was equitable. And it was through a series of prompts around what would it feel like, what would it taste like, what would it smell like, what would it sound like, very creative, very metaphorical. And what came out of that was just a beautiful conversation. And so I just want to read some of the things that came up, and it was beauty, safety, peace, joy, delicious food with shared meals and community meals, abundance, fairness, empathy, compassion, fresh air, clean water, jazz where individuals contribute to a beautiful collective sound. Every item in the garden would get nourishment it needs to flourish, and there would be no fences, only pathways to intertwine and connect everything. Beautiful colors, shapes, scents, enriching the landscape. Everyone would have what they need to thrive. No one would be left behind. Systems of the past and current would be dismantled, and a new way that we can't even imagine would be collectively built. It was this place that I feel can be, if collectively we move to action. And just, if I think of the dreams of DEI, that's just a piece in a metaphorical sense.
You should have went last. I like that. I'm there.
It's a great exercise to think about it. Like,
all the senses, all the things.
So for me, it is walking into boardrooms, walking into the C-suite, and seeing what I see before me right now. And for me, that is like my biggest mission, is to make sure that while I still have 2 feet on this ground and I'm still here, that I bring others with me along this beautiful journey.
Wow, I told y'all she should have went last. Okay. I echo all of those thoughts. I think I'll take a slightly different path, but I agree with everything that everyone is saying. But when I think of that question, the first thing that comes to mind is sort of like psychological safety, right? So anchoring on this theme of being you at all times and all spaces, so that being honored no matter where you go or how you show up. My first thought is that I don't really want to dream about it. Like Martin Luther King had a dream, and I feel like we're all living that, but there's more to it, right? So my reality feels more like people, organizations, spaces, the car wash, the grocery store, right? You create spaces for me and us to feel comfortable, right? We never have this feeling where we're awkward or we're different, and therefore we won't be accepted. And that part for me is really important, because on the other side of that, safety then unlocks your power and who you can be and what you can imagine for yourself and for others. Is what I pour into my children And sometimes it backfires on me, but that's fine. That's parenting. But I believe that, that boldness in who we are, not only as women, but just individuals, that it's honored in all places. That it could be a dream, but I feel like that's the reality that I would hope for.
Thank you. We have a time for about 3 questions. So if anyone has questions, please raise your hand, and, okay, I'm coming back to you. And I would say my dream would be that we would have another topic for this summit, because we wouldn't need to have it anymore.
Hello, ladies. Thank you for this. My name is Chanel Ingram. My question is, obviously you do great work, but how do you manage being in spaces where you get a lot of pushback when you're trying to, handle diversity, equity, and inclusion?
So this happens to me quite a bit, and I'm sure it happens to a lot of us, right? You have people that are very bold at sharing stereotypes, right? So they'll say, well, you know how you Latinas are. So I shut them down by saying, yeah, all that stuff you think about Latinas, I'm all that and then some. And then they walk away with a smile on their face. But in all seriousness, I think that the best thing we could do is to continue to drive education and awareness. I think that when people that are ignorant, right, and I, again, attribute that to lack of, right, I think that it makes them feel comfortable to ask that question, but most importantly, they don't expect the response they're getting. So I don't feed into the stereotype you might have. I literally just blast them with knowledge. And guess what happens? They will not do that again. They will not approach another Latina, another person of color with an ignorant question.
I mean, I'm often, so I can't say I get a lot of pushback, but I'm on a particular board where I pretty much get pushback every single meeting. I won't mention which one it is, but it's a difficult one. And I have to be strategic sometimes, right? Like I start with the end in mind, right? Who are the people that I need to make the thing happen, despite what the loudest voice might be or what the opposition might be? So again, I do a lot of work in education, and the affirmative action ruling has permeated beyond education. It's gone into all types of things. Anything that's black or brown is being challenged, right? And so on a daily basis, whether it's funding for entrepreneurs or admissions for students, right, there's this opposition there. And people will use it as an excuse to not do what they absolutely need to do. So it becomes a very strategic move for me. So where are my allies? Where are the advocates? Who do I need to navigate, right? And to still get to the end game so that when we wake up in this country, these types of barriers no longer exist. I know that's it might be a very overview, macro sort of response, but find your tribe and find your team and galvanize together in order to get the thing done. Don't let anything, even a Supreme Court ruling, right, get in the way of the things you need to do for me. And yes, on the occasional meeting where it gets a little spicy, I'm also prepared for the comeback. But I'm also in a space where, like, I was sharing this with somebody earlier. So I was diagnosed with hypertension, right? Stress-induced hypertension. So I made a decision 6 months ago, these people are not gonna kill me on no level. You're not gonna kill me. I'm not gonna stroke out in this meeting. I'm not gonna stress out. The energy that you have around the thing is yours, and that's your fight alone. I said what I said, it is what it is. And then I'm going to fight another way to still get my outcomes. So you don't have to be that dramatic about it sometimes, because it gets a little spicy. It does, because, my mother raised me in a certain way. So you can't talk to me any kind of way either sometimes. But a lot of times it's about the person and not about you.
Yes.
Right? So I have to think about that. This is really about them. It's not really about me. So I'm going to let them I'm gonna let them do what they need to do, but I'm still gonna reach my goal. Yeah, but it's a fight. Every day I had to fight. That's what I feel like sometimes. But it is truly that difficult, but you have to stay focused and vigilant about the thing that you're trying to make happen. And for me, it's about other people, not about me as well.
I'm going to go to the next question. Anybody else have any questions? Any questions? Okay.
Hello, ladies. Juanita Lewis. And so, as one of the defenses, I have heard, what's the ROI for DEI? And so, what is your response that you have heard used or is appropriate to respond back?
Look, we're looking at you.
I,
You do nonprofit work.
Yeah.
You're gonna need that ROI. I know you probably have to answer that, period.
I mean, it affects everything. And I mean, the ROI is just universal, right? I mean, the answer is, I mean, I think it's just simple. It affects everything. The ROI, it's not something that can be ignored. I think oftentimes people are like, why are you focusing on this DEI work? We hear it in philanthropy, we hear it in nonprofit. Like, doesn't this just benefit one group? And no. This is about everyone collectively. This is about collective humanity, and the ROI is so important. You can't ignore it. And so to not get into the technical, right? Like, because that's not even where I would go. I think it's just, it's a must. That's the answer. It's a must. We need to be doing this to support everybody, right? This is important work, especially in the nonprofit space. And we hear pushback in the nonprofit space often around DEI work, which kind of blows my mind, right? But I mean, a lot of that too. I mean, I work in philanthropy and I sit in the space, but it is, and I'm part of the system of philanthropy, it was built in a way that's inequitable, right? In terms of how we fund and what we feel is important and who has the power in that space. And so I think it's up to for me, at least within my own organization, I have the power to make change there. But what else? What other rooms in the philanthropic space can I step into where we're pushing back against this and talking about how important this is and how we need to change and just dismantle the system that was built in a broken way to begin with? So I don't know. I don't know if I ever got to the answer, but it's
I agree with that. I mean, I would say for me, it's a culture thing, right? If you're not in such a culture where they honor DE&I, and not every single person, but if you're not in that kind of culture, it's an uphill battle. I'm very fortunate. I'm in a culture where they actually believe that let me put as many different type of people around the table to solve the problem, because research says you get the best result. Right? So I've been brought up in that space. I recognize when you're not, right? If you're in spaces like construction, right? No, nothing against people in construction, but we know that in the construction space, it's not kind to women, it's not kind to women of color, right? We just had a disparity study. You're about to get me started. I'm sorry. Just one more thing. We just had a disparity study in New Jersey that came out where entrepreneurs of color are less than 1% awarded contracts in this state. Biggest industries were construction and the professional services, which covers kind of everything else, right? But yet there are, I forgot the figure in the study, but it was definitely like 1.2 billion or something like that as far as revenue that Black and brown entrepreneurs contribute to this economy. So what are we doing, right? It's about a culture that honors it first. And that might be the thing you fight. Otherwise, I can't tell people get another job, but you're gonna have to fight that fight every day and be who you are in it. Sorry.
No worries. Last response.
I just want to add, your employees. We just, all morning, we've been talking about that belonging piece, right? That accessibility. Your employees, if they leave, where does that place you as an employer, right? All that investment you made, right, is no longer here. That is your biggest line of defense, your employees.
Thank you, and thank you. So as we conclude, and I ask you all to do some table work, this is what I ask. That your suggestion not be to read a book, or go to a seminar, or a workshop, or watch a YouTube video, and all of those things are great. But what will your feet do? What will your minds do? What will you do to make a difference in this topic so that eventually it doesn't have to be one? Because I think, particularly for a black woman, 400 plus years is quite enough. And so I ask you all, you have beautiful notebooks and your beautiful swag bags. Take them out, write some things down, write down some ideas. What is your next? And as we take a brief break before we hear our keynote speaker, why don't you take some time to write down your ideas and then share them at the table so everybody walks out with a list of what you'll do. Thank you all so much. Well, I can hear and see that your minds are going, that you have figured out a list of things to do, and I'm super excited. Would anybody like to share one thing that they are going to do as a result? You can just pop out and use your outside voice so we can all hear you, right? Use your 10-inch voice. Anybody with one thing that they want to share from either yourself or a table discussion?
I'll use my outside voice. I don't have that problem. So there's been a nice little conversation here at the table, but one of the things that I shared was each one teach one, right? I think that sometimes we have to have grace for people, so there's a lot of times where we talk about others who may ask questions, another item. Sometimes we have to be able to explain to them why it may have been offensive or why not, or hey, I may be accepting of it, but someone else may not be, and explain why. And sometimes it's just giving grace because when people do want to learn, then we have to educate. We can't say that we want people to understand us and then not be willing to educate. So that would be my feedback here to make that available.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody?
My biggest takeaway is to still continue to enforce our boundaries, but with kindness and compassion. Because similar to what you were talking about, I don't think people are asking questions always from a negative place. It's just that they don't know. But when they don't know, you still have to tell them how you feel, because when you don't feel well or you don't feel good about how their things present to you, you have the right to say, this is how I feel. As someone who's in a predominantly white and male space in government, I am usually the only one. I'm the only black person. I'm usually one of the few females and one of the few LGBTQ plus folks in that space. So I get it triple time. So I have to be like, okay, here's my boundary. And just like what Ms. Tasha said, you ain't gonna put me in the ground. But I have to let you know in kindness and compassion and respect that what you asked or said wasn't cool. But this is how we can work together. I believe that we all want the same thing. We just have different ways of getting it. So how can we come together? So I'm working on, and this is something my takeaway from talking to multiple different people around the room, just continue to enforce those boundaries with kindness and compassion and love. Because I also recognize that the love of God is in me, and if people don't see the love of God in me, they don't think that God is real. So I have to enforce those boundaries of kindness and compassion.
Yep. And personal example, I think, of both of what you shared. I was at a meeting and someone was complaining about the change from freeholders to commissioners. And I said, you know, New Jersey was the last state to do that. And the reason that it was changed is because freeholders was a reference to white male land and people owner. And those were the only people that could buy land. And when I said it, of course, it took all the oxygen out of the Zoom room. But it was an informative space to share, you know, and with this tone, because that's the thing, because I know I have a tone. I know I have a tone. But in this particular, when you're teaching, you have to be toneless, right? If you really want people to learn, you have to figure out how to be toneless, at least the first time. Now, I'm not making promises on the second or third time that we have to go through the same lesson. You are not my elementary school class. You are a grown person, right? So yes, so giving that education with kindness and compassion, and yes, for me as well, the love of God, it's critical. And so I implore you to go out and do something different. I wish I had everybody's email, because I'd be emailing you and asking you, what did you do? Who did you meet? How did you make a change? So with that said, I am getting ready to give you some more ammunition for change in our keynote speaker, Ms. Cheryl Wade. And my phone is playing games with me because it doesn't want to come up. I want to read a little bit about her, but I will say this, and I apologize for not mentioning this. The QR code on the leadership postcard, if you go to the QR code, you will get all of our bios except for Ms. Tasha's, and we'll figure that out as well. But you can get all of our bios, and you can see information about us. So I'm just going to read the first paragraph, and I'm going to read her title because I love it. I love it. Cheryl G. Wade, MBA, PMP, Executive Strategist, and Execution Maven. Don't you love that? I love that. Cheryl is a highly action and results-oriented strategic change and engagement leader with an over 25-year track record of success advising public and private sector companies on strategic, large-scale transformation initiatives. And there's so much more, but you're going to find out all you need to know as we hear Cheryl Wade come to the podium. Thank you.
Wow, good afternoon, and thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome. I am humbled is the word that comes to mind, because what is the term? You can go home again, right? This is home for me, and I just want to start off today by saying thank you to the Central Jersey Club and Madam President for the invitation to be here today to speak, because it is from this club that I learned so much that have really developed me into the person that I am today. So many seeds planted by women in this room, including my family that is here. A number of them are Central Jersey sisters, my mom being one of them. And I am because of Central Jersey. So thank you for having me today. I'm excited to share a few thoughts with you on this topic because I've been doing the work for a while and might have a few things to add to what we have already learned from our very well-positioned and spoken panel. So thank you for setting such a wonderful stage for us to have this conversation. Let me also say thank you to our, national president from BNP for being here. She traveled all the way from Texas to be here, so I feel even a little more pressure. I also want to take a moment to say thank you to the National Second Vice President for being here as well. And I want to say thank you to our sponsor, the sponsor for funding and providing support for these types of events and programs to occur. It is because of your investment that we're here today, so thank you. So when I thought about what I would share with you in my few minutes today, I think the title came up for me, Be the Change, because inclusion starts with I. You heard earlier today that it was International Women's Day yesterday. So what does that mean? It meant that we were celebrating this global day of the progress that we've made across multiple dimensions as women, and this was established back in 1911. So a wonderful thing to celebrate, right? It's something for us annually to really reflect on the progress that we've made. With that progress, we will be acknowledging another day coming up here shortly on March the 12th. Does anybody know what March the 12th is by chance? Anyone? Any thoughts? Any guesses? No? Okay, so March the 12th, which happens to be Tuesday and also occurs in Women's History Month, is National Equal Pay Day. National Equal Pay Day. So what does that mean? That means that, let me go back one. National Equal Pay Day is basically the day that marks how far into the calendar year a woman must work to earn the average that a man has earned in the previous year. Let that sit in. So when we think about the progress we've made, we've come a long way, but we still have so much further to go, right? A journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. And one of the things that I used to think when I came into this work was, I'm gonna work myself out of a job one day. That's my vision. I realize now that that is not likely to be true, but my goal is to leave the places that I go better than I found them. And that's something we all can hopefully do as well. So Equal Pay Day. Not only is it that you have to work till March to earn what a man may have earned back in the previous year, but when you look at diversity across different demographics of diversity, that day gets further and further out. So I just bring this slide up to just show you that, for me as a Black woman, it's going to take me till September of this year to earn what a man has earned in the previous year. It's powerful, sobering, right? Pretty sobering. So then I ask, whose job is it to fix it? Whose job is it to fix it? Is it Ms. Pam's job? Is it our illustrious panel's job as DEI leaders and practitioners? Is it our jobs to fix that? Well, yes, it is. We've taken that on because it's a career, and I always like to say this is just as much a calling as it is a career for me. But it's all of our jobs in this room to do this work. Because ultimately, diversity, equity, and inclusion work is a team sport. That has been my motto around this work for a very long time. That we all have a role to play in how we continue to advance diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice, accessibility. We all play a role. No matter where you sit in your role in respective organizations or community organizations, we all can play a role in helping to advance inclusion. We can all take that responsibility on. So my charge to us today is around being the change you want to see in the world. I actually have this in my room, in my bedroom. I was going to actually take a picture of it, but my mom would laugh because she knows my room is probably not picture-worthy all the time. But I really identify with this quote, and I think Mahatma Gandhi is one of the people who've said it. But ultimately, the picture in my room is when I first wake up and I look up, it hangs and it says, "You be the change you wish to see in the world," right? So when I say whose job is it to fix it, it's all of our jobs to fix it, ultimately. In addition to the stats that I shared around pay equity and the work we have to do, women represent 1 in 4 C-suite leaders, right? So that's the top tiers of the organizations we all have worked for or have worked for. Women of color, 1 in 16, so even less. Women earn 16% less than a man on average, and women earn 84 cents to every dollar that a man makes. So there's definitely work to be done here, right? There's work that we have to do. And it's going to take a few things for us to do that work together because it's not easy. And so I'm going to give you a couple of tips, and if you haven't taken out those really cute journals for the summit today, you may want to take a couple of notes of things because I am going to leave you with a few questions to ask yourself of how you can be the change you wish to see in the world. But the first here is around being bold. So what does be bold mean? Be bold means be confident, courageous, fearless. Be bold in your belief in yourself as a change maker from wherever you sit in the organization. You don't have to have a title. You don't have to be in a diversity, equity, and inclusion role. But there is a role for you as a change maker, even if it is just sharing your personal experience so that others get a sense of that the experience might not be the same for everybody. You have a key role to play, so you leverage and use your influence wherever you have influence. Because if not you, then who? Have courage to step out of your comfort zone and learn. Seek to understand the experiences of others. Lean in. We were hearing earlier about how do you really, if you're getting pushback or if you are experiencing microaggression, what is it that you do? And I always like to say, call people in. Don't call people out instead of calling people out. Call them in, right? Make it a safe space to actually have the conversation. I think as a country, unfortunately, we've lost the art of civil discourse and how to have those conversations. Yes, we have. Yeah. And so I think, again, in our efforts to be the change, call people in and open the space for the dialogue. Seek to understand those experiences of others that might not be like your own and recognize that everybody has a different experience. And they're seeing the world through the lens of their own lived experience. Be bold in terms of seeing, if you see something, say something, right? Isn't that the term they use a lot these days? If you see something, say something. Use your voice. To quote what was said earlier, inspect with respect, right? But if you see it, say something. And I just wanted to come back to the term microaggressions because I didn't want to assume that everybody knew what that meant, right? So a microaggression is basically a statement or an action, right, where somebody is, a statement or an action where somebody could be discriminatory, it might not be discriminatory, but it's a statement or an action or an incident regarded as an instance of indirect or subtle, unintentional discrimination against members of marginalized groups such as ethnic and racial minorities. So that's what it means in its term. And I always like to tell people, if you're experiencing a microaggression, see something, say something, right? Call them in, have the conversation. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you meant by that statement? Because here's how that felt to me, or here's how I experienced that conversation or that interaction, right? And open up the dialogue. I don't always give people a pass, but I do give grace, right? But I think you are responsible for what you know. So it is a bit of a onus on us to raise it, and then for them to hopefully take responsibility for making the shift and the change. Because the first thing you're going to hear is, oh, that's not what I meant, that's not what I intended, right? And so I always like to say intent versus impact, right? And it's more about the impact. This is how it impacted me, and I need you to know that, right? So be bold in that and stand courageously in owning your experience and your feelings, and don't let people talk you out of it through gaslighting, which is another term we heard earlier, right? Which gaslighting is where people try to make it that it wasn't, it's a form of psychological manipulation. I'm actually reading a definition. Form of psychological manipulation in which the abuser attempts to sow self-doubt and confusion in their victim's mind. And that's what happens sometimes. So don't allow people to gaslight you. Own your feelings, share them, and hold them accountable. All with grace, of course. Next, we want to be balanced in this work. So balance is where you take everything into account and you arrange things in good proportion. So what's the balance that we need to bring to how we want to be the change in this world? Be balanced in your perspective, again, because you know that everybody sees the world through a different lens and through their own lived experience. Pick your battles and partner with others. We heard this earlier. Galvanize together, Tasha said, right? Let's make sure we're partnering and doing this work together. One, because it's really lonely to do it by yourself. And it's two, you can just achieve so much more when you do it together with others. The voice of the collective is so much stronger. Find your allies. So many of them are sitting in this room, right? We've talked about, I actually had the opportunity to join Central Jersey not too long ago for one of their internal summits, and we talked about, what does that collaboration and partnership and inclusion look like for you as an organization? How do you tap and work with and collaborate with other organizations so that you're collectively coming together to advance things forward? So much more power in that, in the collective. And there's this mentality, hopefully, that comes out that a rising tide floats all boats. That's kind of what I love about working in the DE&I space. For me, I've always found that there's this openness to collaboration and partnership and sharing, whether I'm talking to a DE&I person in my own industry or another industry, because ultimately we had the same vision. So find those organizations that you have similar vision with, or other people that you have shared vision with, and partner together to move things forward. And then in your balance, make sure you're resting along the way. Because this work, let me tell you, is heavy. And in this particular time, it's particularly heavy, right? Because we know that there's this assault and sabotage against the progress that has been made to date. So I would ask that you rest, you recharge, but you re-engage. Take those moments, take those breaks, step out. Take 2 breaks if you need to. That's right. And remember that, I always use this hashtag sometimes. I say DEI is not for punks. It's not for punks. So definitely take your time to recharge your battery. Because when you think about, again, the notion of DEI being a team sport, what do teams do? Teams collaborate, they partner, right? They find they find the people they need for their team. And when you're playing a game, what happens? Some people are out on the field, on the front lines doing the work, and others are what? Sitting on the bench. And when somebody's tired and needs to come out, I'm coming out. You come, right. And then when you're ready, coach, put me in, right? So rest, recharge, but definitely re-engage. That will help keep you balanced. And then be brave. So what is bravery? Brave is voluntary action in the face of adversity and in dangerous circumstances. So yes, there may be risks and consequences to doing this work. Yes, there may be pushback that comes your way when you're raising a concern. Understand what the risks and the consequences may be, but don't let them drive you. Don't let them deter you, particularly if you know that what you're standing on is fundamentally right. Be confident in knowing that you can handle whatever comes. And thirdly, trust your instincts, right? Use your instincts to guide you in being brave and standing out and using your voice to be a change champion in this work. I always find some of those shows like, have you all seen the show with John Quinones that says, "What would you do?" Right? And I find that so interesting because I always sit and I ask myself, what would I do? Would I be brave? Would I be bold and brave in those situations? And what you find, I'm pleasantly surprised sometimes to see the reactions of people, the humanity in people, right, in that show. And if you haven't watched it, I highly encourage picking a few episodes and just leaning in to see how, people operate. Because what you find is in the inordinary, people find extraordinary strength, right? So whether it's in the what would you do scenario, or whether it's, I don't know, in a scenario where you hear about a woman lifting a car off of a child, something really, you're like, well, how did they do that? You'll find the strength will be there when you need it most. So be bold, be balanced, be brave. And so here's my charge to you around the questions I wanted to leave you with today to think about, reflect upon as part of our conversations today. What bold step can you take personally And again, it doesn't matter what your role is, it doesn't matter what your title is, it doesn't matter, whether you're working, whether you're retired, if you're in a community group, there's a role you can play. What bold step can you take? How will I stay balanced, right? How do I make sure that I'm taking care of myself because I can't give from an empty cup, ultimately, right? Just like they say, put your own mask on first, okay? Fill your cup and give from the overflow. And then 3, where can I be more brave? Where can I be more brave? So that's a challenge, right? Where can I step a little more further into helping to be a change maker? Ultimately, the video is really about just reminding us all that inclusion actually starts with I. And so my charge to everybody is to be the change you wish to see in the world. Remember that inclusion starts with I, because if not us, then who? Okay? So be the change. Thank you.
All right, once again, a great big applause for Cheryl Wade. Thank you so much for being our keynote speaker today. And another round of applause for our wonderful panelists as well as the moderator. So what a phenomenal day. Hopefully you've each taken a takeaway with you so that you can, again, as mentioned earlier, DE&I is not just a fad or a phrase for the day. It is a call to action for each of you to take something away and go back out into the world and say how you can be an advocate or a DE&I champion. So on behalf of the Central Jersey Club, we thank all of you for your attendance today. So please stay connected with us. Also, just as a friendly reminder, as was mentioned previously, the little cards on the tables have a QR code. Please make sure to scan those with your phone so that you can see the bios and information of those who presented today, with the exception of Ms. Tasha Youngblood Brown that was mentioned. However, it also has information on keeping in touch with the Central Jersey Club through LinkedIn. So as we depart, we wish you well on your continued leadership journey. So be safe, be well, and please